do a review on Likutei Sichos Nechelik Chof Tes, volume 29. This is the Sicha for the Parshas Vayelech. It's a Sicha that the Rebbe explains why Rashi changes the language from the way it's in the Gemara and in the Medrash. And the Rebbe explains that when it says in the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu says that he cannot no longer teach Torah, his time is up, and Yeshua is taking over, how could it be that we find that immediately following there is three more parshas in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu taught them? So why does he say "Lo uchal oid lotzis v'lovei"? I'm not able to study Torah. That's why the Rebbe explains that Rashi uh, uses the loshon that what happened here was that he was forgot or was closed masoires umayones hachochma. These two aspects that the Rebbe will explain, masoires, what comes down by tradition, mayones, the fountain of the pilpul of Torah, and that is not something which in the parsha, and therefore he could continue to do that. And Rebbe will explain, but since Moshe Rabbeinu saw that there was a change in his status, he realized that his time is up. We'll learn, go step by step. We're learning in memory and for the benefit of the soul of our son, Harav Levi Yitzchok ben Chaim Tzvi. Shama should have an aliyah to Ein Nishmas Yitzuru B'Tzur Chaim. We'll do inside step by step. Vayelech, Aleph. From Pasuk ben Meya ve'esrim shana anochi hayoy. So the Pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu says, I am 120 years today. Lo uchal oid lotzis v'lovei. I can no longer go out and come in. Literally, one would understand that he was weak because he didn't have the koyach anymore. But our sages tell us no. Cannot go out and come is talking about in the words of Torah. Zogn Chazal. So our sages of blessed memory say, Ados meint nit lotzis v'lovei mamish. This does not mean to go out and to come in literally. Actually, while Toshash Koichai, because say that his strength has weakened, he doesn't have the koyach, he doesn't have the strength, nor lotzes v'lovei v'divrei Torah, to go out and come in the words of Torah. So what the Gemara says, Melamed shenistumu mimenu shari chochma. This teaches us that from Moshe were closed the gates of wisdom. The gates of wisdom closed for him, so he is not able to go in and out in the words of Torah, and that was the meaning of when he says "Leuchal oid lotzis v'lovei." That's the lashon of the Gemara. And so the Gemara says that melamed shenistemu mimenu shari chochma, that what was closed from him, the gates of chochma. But Rashi, quoting this Gemara, seemingly changes the end, what closed for Moshe Rabbeinu. Instead of saying the Shari Chochma, Rashi uses the Loshen Masoides Umayonis. Der Maimer werd gebracht in Pirush Rashi al HaTorah. This statement is brought down in Rashi's commentary on the Torah. Nor b'shinu Loshen, but there is a change of language. Anstatt Shari Chochma, instead of what the Gemara uses, the gates of Chochma, is the Loshen in the Rashi. Rashi says what was closed, Nistatmu, Masoires Umayones HaChochma, the traditions and the wells of Chochma. Why this change? The Rebbe says there's also another version of the Gemara in Ein Yaakov. The Ein Yaakov, the way it quotes, in there. Valderech Zevekam Rishonim, and similarly also in several Rishonim, when they quote the Gemara, Ved Gebrach di Girsa, over there the version is in Gemara, Mayones astot anstot share. So Melamed shenistatmu mimenu mayones chochma, not share chochma, but mayones chochma. So we do find a girsa in the Gemara saying mayones, and also in the Medrash Tanchumon, in Tanchuma Pashat V'aschanon, is the girsa, the version is masoides chochma, the traditional chochma. So we do find, the Rebbe points out, that in Ein Yaakov in the Gemara uses Loshen Mayonis, and in the Tanchuma he uses the Loshen of Masoidus, and Rashi sort of combined the Loshen of Masoidus of the Tanchuma with the version, the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov, which says Mayonis. So maybe it's not such a problem, it's not a change, there's other versions. But why would Rashi choose the uncommon language when there is the common Gemara that is used by everybody, and pick another version? And why would he combine two from two different sources and bunch them up together over here? There must be some reason for that. But in addition to the fact was mandarf of marbir, you need an explanation. Let it be Rashi has sources in different places. Favos bringt nit Rashi the Girse Ravachas. We still need to understand, why doesn't he bring the version that is common? Shari Chochma. And the Gemara by us is Shari Chochma, the gates of Chochma. So besides that is Oid V'Iker. So the main question, addition, may gefind nit in Ergetz, we don't find anywhere b'medrash Chazal shelefonenu, in the Chazal expounding that we have, that we are able to see, nobody brings together these two Masoides and Mayones. So bring in beide Lashonis, Masoides and Mayones. Euch nit Masoides v'shari. We also don't find Masoides and the gates, whether it's Mayones or Masoides or gate, but there's these two Lashonis of Masoides and Rashi is Metzarev beide Girsos zusammen, and Rashi combined these two versions together. So what's is Rashi's intent over here? There must be something behind Rashi using Dafke these languages. And even the Rebbe says, if Rashi did find, or there is some source, but Rashi doesn't need to quote. Why is Rashi? Rashi should say the usual, would seem. Euch nit move on. We get come upon him. We already spoken many times. Is nit in Yoni for Pirush Rashi ala Torah. Rashi's task when he explains the Torah to mighty sein droshes Chazal b'diuk l'shonim, to quote the expounding of the sages exactly in precise language. So according to this, in our case, Pavos bringt Rashi dem Loschen Masoides Mayones HaChochma. Why does he bring the language, even if Rashi has some source for it? But why would he bring the Losh Masoides Mayones HaChochma, a quote, Uzoknit Alosh Narogel? And he doesn't use the normal language. Not even to quote from anywhere. Rashi is not to have to quote. Rashi should have used the regular language. Rashi himself starts his commentary. Lotzis v'lovoi, Rashi says, b'divrei Torah. No mayonis, no maser, lo b'divrei Torah. So Rashi should have said, shenistimu mimenu, divrei Torah, that from him were blocked the words of Torah. So essentially, the Rebbe wants to know, Rashi uses here a language that what Moshe forgot, that he was not able to continue leading the Yidden Leuchal Lotzis V'Lovoi. Rashi uses the Lashon Masoides Umayonis. The Rebbe wants to know Besides the fact that this changes from all the sources that we have, but Rashi doesn't even have to look for sources. Rashi should do what's most uh, sensible at this place over here. Over here, Rashi says he cannot do divrei Torah, so Rashi should have said he cannot continue. Shenistum menu divrei Torah, and the Rebbe sec explains in Ois Beis that Rashi is actually coming to answer a very strong question with these languages to specifically say that he only forgot the Masoidus Mayonis. He can't say that he forgot the words of Torah. If Rashi would have said that, the Rebbe will explain. But we find in the Pasuk immediately that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them Torah. If he just said that he doesn't have Torah, there's a certain aspect in Torah that Rashi has to explain that even though Moshe Rabbeinu realizes that he can't teach anymore, but still he was able to teach these parshas, as the Rebbe will explain. Base. Yes. Yes, Leimar, we can say, as Rashi Bavoron Dermit, Ashayla Pshuta, that with this language, Rashi is coming to caution us and to answer a very simple question. B'lashoin ha'olam, to use the language people say, aklotz kasha, a question which is like a very obvious, and it's almost unmovable, like a klotz, which is a piece of wood. It's very strong. It seems a very obvious, problematic issue over here. And the Rebbe says he hasn't found anybody asking this. As of now, I hasn't found as men soll sich stellen of them, that the commentators should base themselves and ask this. What's the question? The Klotz Kasha. How could we say Moshe Rabbeinu can't teach Torah when he's teaching Torah? Wie sagt men lo yuchal losses v'love b'divrei Torah? How are we saying that Moshe Rabbeinu is saying I can no longer go out and come in with the words of Torah? B'shas as balder noch, at the same time, immediately after saying that, hat Moshe Rabbeinu übergegeben Eden a ribun yoni Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu passed along to the Yidden a very great amount of matters of Torah. He told them a lots of Torah afterwards, which is namely the Drai Sedres, Vayelech, Hazinum, V'zoi Sabrocha. There's three more portions. This is in the portion of Nitzovim, and then follows Vayelech, Hazinum, V'zoi Sabrocha. Now, with regards to the eighth last psukim where it says Moshe Rabbeinu dies, 8 psukim before the end, and those psukim that follow. So over there, there's a question whether Moshe Rabbeinu said those or not, as Rashi brings down later on. But so the Rebbe explains that, but not everything else up to there was said by Moshe Rabbeinu. Unor beneged the letzte 8 psukim von Torah. It is only with regards the last 8 verses of the Torah. Was Hauptzachon mit that starts with Vayomos Shom Moshe, that Moshe dies. Gefitmen zwei days, we find that there's 2 opinions. Who wrote Vayomos Shom Moshe? Rav gebracht euch in Pirush Rashi. Rashi also brings down these 2 opinions. So over there's an issue. Maybe Yeshua wrote that Moshe Rabbeinu died. Other Moshe Kosev B'dema. Moshe was writing with tears in his eyes while he says Vayom told him to write Vayomas Moshe, so he wrote Vayomas Moshe. Okay, so that's a question. But the other psukim up till there, bis the letzte 8 psukim, but as it pertains to Vayelech, Hazina, Zisabracha, until the last 8 psukim, is less man the polig, as Moshe geschrieben, so there is no disagreement that Moshe said them, and Moshe Rabbeinu recorded it. So Moshe was teaching Torah. So how could we say, that I can't teach Torah anymore when he was teaching Torah right afterwards? So maybe you're going to say when he can't teach Torah, he means halachas of Torah, to lead them, because the Moshe Rabbeinu has to teach halachas. So first of all, the Rebbe says that we're to say that local lots is talking about halacha is also, but there is many halachas in the psukim also. We can't answer. You can't answer as midivrei Torah werd gemein blois in yon halacha. When it says the words of Torah meaning just halacha, that he can no longer give them halacha, the law, the rulings. Because this is something very difficult to say as dvorim from Torah shebiksav. When he says divrei Torah and the words of Torah shebiksav, what he means geya nitarain in klal from divrei Torah. So now we're saying when he said divrei Torah, he meant halacha, and the three parshas, those are not divrei Torah. Very difficult. But mainly, even if you were going to argue that it's halacha, in odi parshas and faranei halachas. In these parshas that follow, there's also halachas. Mitzvahs hakil, the mitzvah of hakil, ksivas Torah. So there's also halachas. And not only that, in every word of Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu taught, there's also the commentary. So that means when Moshe Rabbeinu taught it, he taught it with the commentaries. How does it fit with that he cannot teach Torah anymore? Nochmal. Yeah, the word for Torah shebiksav is gegeben geworden zu Moshe mit seinem Pirush. Every word of the written Torah was given to Moshe with its commentary, with its meaning. In Torah Shebal Peh, from the oral Torah. Because von davke durch dem kann man wissen klar die Kavana von Torah shebiksav. Because it's only through this can you really clearly know the intent of the written Torah. Otherwise, the written Torah doesn't really fully explain itself what it means. So we have to say, when anything of Torah shebiksav that Moshe Rabbeinu received, he knew the commentary of the Torah Shebal Peh, Kimuvim Bepashtus, as understood. It's obvious. Since also these three sedres of Vayelech Hazinu Bracha, they were transmitted to the Yidden through Moshe Rabbeinu. So for sure he had to pass along everything that is necessary to understand these parshas. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to tell them. He was giving the over what is these parshas. So you had to tell them everything so they can understand. Just haste, which means he also gave the meaning, the interpretation, the commentary of the parshas, which is in the oral Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying everything, the words of these three parshas with the commentary of the oral Torah of this parshas, because he had to transfer it so they didn't know what he's saying. So why do we say, how does the pasuk says, I can no longer come in words of Torah? So if they would have just said, as the Rebbe suggested, I should have said, would have had a problem. The Rebbe is Rashi Moisif, that's where Rashi adds. There wasn't just Divrei Torah. Specifically, two areas, the Masoides and Mayonu, which are not necessary to transmit the Torah to the Yidden, and they can still know, but still, the Masoides and Mayonis HaChochma, as the Rebbe will explain, that was taken away from Moshe. As it pertains to these two aspects of Torah, Masoides and Mayonis HaChochma, is shaykh zu sagen, over there we can say, as they seien nicht geworden in the Divrei Torah, that they were not included in the last three parshas that Moshe Rabbeinu taught. They weren't included. We can apply that. We can't say Divrei Torah. No, they had to tell them all the pirush and the words, but Masoides and Mayonis are not included. Was Moshe Rabbeinu had gelernt with the Eden in the Drei Sedres Kidl Kamon. That Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them, as we will explain, these two parts of Torah doesn't necessarily have to be what Moshe Rabbeinu transmitted to the Eden by saying this parshas, and that's why Rashi has to teach specifically when he meant Leuchad Lotzis, that the words of Torah have been closed, which areas, the areas of Masoides and Mayonis. What exactly are Masoides and Mayonis? So the Rebbe basically explained that Rashi is coming to tell us the area is not just that he forgot Torah, that wouldn't fit with the obvious that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching Torah. So Rashi says he forgot two areas which are not necessary to transmit the Torah. So that's enough for Moshe Rabbeinu to realize that he can no longer teach, but doesn't mean that he couldn't give over the Torah that he did give over. Why? So what is it, Masoides and Mayonis? And the Rebbe will explain, Masoides is tradition that he got orally, which are not connected necessarily to the Torah, to the Parsha. That's additional things that Moshe Rabbeinu received orally. And Mayonis is the well of Torah, which is the pilpul of Torah, which also isn't necessary for Moshe Rabbeinu to give it over. He didn't give it over. But still, as the Rebbe will explain, this meant that there was a change, and he knew that he can no longer lead, even though that wasn't necessary. Let's look inside. Gimel. Der Teich von Wort Masoides, the translation of the words of Masoides is tradition, is the inyonim that were passed along to him. Welche seinen Nimser geworden zu Moshe and Sinai Balpeh, those are transmitted to Moshe from Sinai orally. And the Rebbe says orally means, in this case, the Masoides that have no hint in the Torah. Sometimes there is parts of the Torah which, even though it's not open, but there's still a hint in the Torah. Tradition means what he got only because Hashem told him so, without a hint of the Torah. That specifically, what is Masoides by tradition that was passed along? Those parts that don't even have a hint in the written Torah. With the Gemara sagt, as the Gemara says, Torah roiv biksav umid alpeh. The majority of Torah was written, but there was a little bit that is orally. So Rashi explains, Rashi is das mefarish, Rashi explains, roiv biksav, meaning not that mostly was written, but mostly has a connection to what's written. Roiva Torah tluya b'medrash. Most of the Torah hinges on expounding. Midrash HaTorah nidreshes. We have the measures in which you can expound the Torah. That's most of the Torah. What means miyuta al peh? Minority is orally. She'ein remes lilmed lo b'Torah el l'moish nemer al peh. The minority al peh means there is no hint to learn it from the Torah. It was just told to Moshe orally without having a connection to Torah. So that means Masoides. So Masoides is talking about specific things that were not connected even in a hint to the Torah, but the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu. And then Mayones HaChochma meint nit the gufa alochas von Torah shebal peh. The wells of wisdom does not mean the body of the laws of Torah, the laws itself, nor pilpulo shel Torah. That is the pilpul of Torah, which is like a well which keeps on going. Mayan hamizgaber, was is bedugma. Amayan, the pilpul is similar to a well which keeps on going, as the Mishnah says. Mayan hamizgaber, a well that is strengthening. It's always going strong. This is the insights into Torah, the pilpul insights and the different ways to explain and to explore the Torah. was zu Pilpule de Reise, but really to explore the Torah, the Pilpul, is nitoken gevul. There is no limit. There's endless exploring the Torah. But l'shoina kosuv, to use the language of the verse, arucha meretz midorucha miniyam, it's longer than a measured land, and it's wider than the ocean. As we see literally, there's no end to it. Then you can, in Torah, go on and on and on. So, Moshe Rabbeinu just was teaching them. He wasn't teaching them. There's no sense. This doesn't to teach them all the people because there's no limit to that. Is the funish verstandig bepashtus. So we understand, and actually this is very simply understood, as in the divrei Torah was Moshe Rabbeinu had gelernt mit the Yidden, that in the words of Torah that Moshe was teaching the Yidden, afil in pirusha von Torah shebal peh, even that he was explaining the oral Torah. That he was explaining them from the oral Torah that's connected to the psukim. He was only talking about the halachas itself and their commentary from Torah Shebal Peh. The Torah Shebal Peh, as it explains those halachas, but not the endless insights into Torah. Of a nit pilpula deraisa. Was what it king bull? Not the inside the pilpul of Torah, which has no limit. There's no way for him to teach everything. So Rebbe is trying to say here that he could forget the pilpul, close up from him that he doesn't have the pilpul, that insight in Torah, but that has nothing to do with him being able to transmit, because you don't transmit the pilpul anyways, the people, the halachas, and the commentary of the halachas. And the Rebbe brings further that the pilpul is not something which Moshe Rabbeinu has entirely given over to the Yidden. Especially according to the statement of the Gemara. As pilpul that the pilpul of Torah was given only to Moshe and his seed. Nor Moshe nog, but Simon Israel, Moshe conducted himself with a good eye while it was given for him, and he gave it to the Yin. Is moving as euch believe pilpuli deraisa. So you see, it's understood. Even if you don't transmit the pilpul of Torah, the divrei Torah. So the words of Torah shekiblu b'nei Yisrael from Moshe, that the Yidden received the words of Torah from Moshe, Adover Shalom, they're complete, because the Eibshter didn't even mean for him to give it to the Yidden. He gave it over extra to the Yidden, but you can give over Torah without giving over the Pilpula Deraisa. So now we understand that the traditions that Moshe Rabbeinu just knew the Eibshter gave him, and the Pilpul Deraisa that Moshe Rabbeinu had, it wasn't necessary for the parshas. You can write the parshas and still not give over the traditions or the people of Torah. Now it's understood that it's not, doesn't contradict. That there's no contradiction here. As even though that from Moshe Rabbeinu were closed the traditions and the wells of wisdom, von deswegen hat Moshe Rabbeinu übrig gegeben zu Eden the drei Sedres b'shlemusam. And yet he gave over these three Sedres completely, with everything necessary. Side the Parshas Atzmam, whether it's the portion itself, the Torah Shebiksav of the written Torah, or side Pirusha, the Torah Shebal Peh, Pirusha Mamash, and also the commentary Torah Shebal Peh. The actual interpretation, not insights, but the actual interpretation of the words to understand what the Torah means. He explained it all. That wasn't closed for him, because Valdi Masoides, the traditions aren't tied to the parsha. To begin with, they're not tied to the parshas themselves. the mayonis. So as far as the masoidus, to begin with, they have nothing to do with the parsha. Doesn't have to give them over. And as far as the mayonis, the insights, pilpula deraisa, the pilpul of Torah, is nitoken hechrich as Moshe zol muzen lernen the inyanim mit the Bnei Yisrael. We don't find there's no necessity for Moshe to teach them those aspects with the Yidden. Like there's no limit to them, kina. Und der Fahr schreibt nicht Rashi b'pshuta shemikra dem loshen. That's why Rashi doesn't write in the simple meaning, just the language of Shari Chochma, the gates. If was hot nit kein Sheiches zu chilukim b'teichel anal, the gates of Chochma does not emphasize and say something that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have to give them. If Rashi would have just said the gates of Chochma, you don't understand. So how is he teaching them? Only these two specific aspects of Torah, the Masoides and the Mayonis, Rashi says that he didn't give, and that's why he could teach the rest of the Torah. But if he said Shari Chochma, we don't have that distinctions that it's something that he didn't teach them. Shari includes all gates of Chochma. Now, the Rebbe further emphasized that's why Rashi also, even though Rashi uses Loshen Masoides and Mayonis, but Rashi could have said Masoris u'Mayonis of Torah instead of saying Masoris u'Mayonis of Chochma. But because Rashi specifically wants to detach it from Torah, this is not the part necessary for teaching that part of Torah. And that's why Rashi uses the Chochma. Based on this, we can explain Farvos Rashi is medayik to bring in euch dem Wort Mayonis HaChochma. Why does he bring the words also Chochma? Okay, Chochma it says in the Gemara, but Rashi is taking Mayonis. Why do you say nicht Mayonis HaTorah? You should have said the wells of Torah. But because Rashi wants lahadgish to emphasize, as the Mayonis are nicht muchrach for an inyan von Torah ve'roh, that these well springs aren't necessary. We don't have to for the matter of Torah ve'irah, of Torah and instruction. Warum damult volt es Moshe gemusst lernen mit Yidden? Had it been connected to Hirah, then Moshe Rabbeinu would have had to teach it to the Yidden. So Rashi doesn't say Masyonis and Masoris of Torah, but Chochma. Nor is inyan from Teisefes Chochma shebet Torah. This is in addition the wisdom of Torah. But then the question really the Rebbe asks, okay, so the Rebbe explained that what was forgotten from him is not the Torah with its commentary, but the tradition and the wellspring, the pilpul. So why did this tell Moshe Rabbeinu, oh, I can no longer, if it's not necessary for the Yiddens? So that means you can give over Torah. So Mele, if you can't give over the tradition, you can't tackle it. So when he says La'uchal Masoidus, we understand, because in order to give over fully Torah, you have to also give the traditions. You can't teach if you don't have the Masoidus, what you got from the Eibishter. But why does Moshe Rabbeinu also say that I don't have the pilpul? But how does not having the pilpul tell him that he can no longer do it? So teach Torah without the pilpul. And the Rebbe explains the fact that there was a change told Moshe Rabbeinu, even from the fact that he can't teach pilpul, that lo yuchal. Let's look inside. Daled l'chayrish aber noch nit gelatik. Still not so smooth. Der inyan von nistem memenu masoidus mayonis hachochma, on this idea that the traditions and the wells of wisdom have been blocked from Moshe, that comes a reason that I no longer can go in and out in words of Torah. That's what he's saying. Was meint nicht der Limud la'atzmai doesn't mean that he himself is missing some level. Nor the limudim b'nei Yisrael. I can't teach the Yidden. Isn't it moving? So to teaching the Yidden, why does he need the mayonnaise? He needs the masoides, but why does he need the mayonnaise? Isn't it moving? Bishleima b'negei zu masoides. If we're talking about the passing along is moving. Also eben ist by Moshe the Masoides that if by Moshe the traditions were blocked from Torah, can it lots of love? He can't be teaching anymore. Sein der welche geht über Torah zu Eden. He cannot be the one to transmit, to continue to transmit the Torah to the Eden. Well, Eden muss wissen euch the Masoides, because he didn't have a need to know also the traditions that were passed along. So he is no longer can do that. Oh, but as he also brings down, he doesn't have the wells of wisdom. That pilpul vibal dazeir limud is nit muchrach far di bnei Yisrael. The study of the pilpul of the Mayan isn't necessity for the Yidden canal. We don't have to have the pilpul. Vipas to zogun. So how does it fit to say? Because the well springs of wisdom have been closed, he no longer can go in and out. So Eden b'divrei Torah, that he can't teach Eden in the Torah, but it's not needed to teach Eden Torah. Okay, so maybe the reason he was saying it because the Masoides, not because of the not because of the Mayonis. We can't sagen, as the Lotzis Velove is not mitzadem, was nicht mit Männer Masoides. Why can't he come and go? Is because, okay, he doesn't have the Masoides. And that's the only reason, Taka. And the Mayonis is not the reason. Weil für sehr, was hat der Eberster gemacht, als nicht werden von Menschen durch die Mayonis Chochma. So why did the Eberster make it that he should also be blocked from the wells of Chokhmah? That wasn't necessary. The conclusion, which is Hashem's message to Moshe, that he's done, his time is up from leading. So why if we're going to say it's only because he doesn't have the tradition, so why did the Eibishter make him forget the also this pilpul? He could have continued and he would still got the hint. That doesn't say anything forgetting the mayonis of Chokhmah. And also, why does he have to bring it down? So, how is that a proof? The Rebbe says now that the fact that he forgot some of his Torah was also a indication to Moshe Rabbeinu that it's time. They're beating them. We can say the explanation. Von dem Gufa was es ist geworden, ist the fact that part of his Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu has been blocked, closed up. As Ken Zayin, even though it's possible, as his Voltit Mishanig when sein Ashpot, that would not change his able to give over to the Yidden. Is a simen, that is a sign, as a Sotzer geendig sein Lotzes V'lovit zu Bnei Yisrael, that his time to go out and come in for the Yidden has concluded. Zayin Nisias, his leadership. The time has come for Yeshua to werden the Manig Yisrael, to become the leader of Yidden. It's not because it would impact his transmission, but he himself, the fact that he's no longer on that level, that is a message for him that he can no longer teach. The Rebbe brings out here even a deeper idea, that the fact that Moshe isn't anymore consistent tells Moshe Rabbeinu that his advantage was that he was always consistent, and that the fact that he's missing something, that tells him that his superiority over Yeshua has ended, because as the Rashi brings down from the Gemara, that Moshe Rabbeinu was like the sun who's always shines, and Yeshua was like the moon, there was changes. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is starting to change, that told him already that leadership has been completed. As is Chazal sagen, It's known what our sages of blessed memory say, Arab Gebracht in Pirush Rashi ala Torah, which is brought down in Rashi and the Torah, as Pnei Moshe Kechama. Moshe is like the sun. Pnei Yeshua, the face of Yeshua, is Kilavon is like the moon. Einer von die Chilukim zwischen der Racham und der Halvona. One of the differences between the shine of the sun and the shine of the moon is as der Eur Halvona steht ständig in a Matze von Shnuim. The light of the Levona is always changing. Aliyah Viridis goes up and down. The moon, it's not always the same. Mashenkin in Erachamo is Nitokin Shinui. But in the light of the sun, there's no changes. Und das ist einer von den Timing, was Moshe wird zugeglichen zu Chamadavke. This is one of the reasons why we compare and say Moshe is like the sun. Weil Midose shel Moshe is Midas HaEmes. Moshe's measure is the measure of truth. Was is in Yonah is built in Shinui. What is truth means it doesn't change. Azoi, as in Eure shel Moshe is Nechayach Kenin shel Shinui. That in the light of Moshe does not fit, doesn't apply, there's no changes there. The Riben, Bishas, Moshe Rabbeinu had their field. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu sensed as Nistimu Mimenu Mayonas HaChochma, that the wells of wisdom have been closed for him. That even though it didn't affect him, but it closed and there was a change in his light. Is dos gufa bavais, that itself is evidence, a proof, as is angerid geworden etzem in Yonah Shaloyre, that his light, which is a non-changeable light, all of a sudden it changed, so that this proves that his light itself has been changed. Lotzis v'lovish al Moshe, the coming and going of Moshe, even though it wasn't in an area, but that it would affect the Yidden, but it was Moshe Rabbeinu's emes. If there is a change there, there's something changed in his light. Und der Riber is kenaf keminenit in welchen Inyans is geworden der Shinoi. That's why it doesn't really make a difference in which area there is a change. Nistemu mimenu. That from him, afilu oibsis in an Inyan, was writ nit on lecheres an ashpot of Israel, even if it's in an area which seemingly does not touch his influence to the Yidden, is that etzem Inyan hashinui, just that there is a change, shoyna ha'chocha, that's a proof, as is gekommen the Zeit von Shinuyim, that now the time changes, the light of changes takes place. The Zeit for Yeshua Kilavona, the time for Yeshua Lavona, an from Shinuyim. There's a time now for changes already, and it's time to give it over to Yeshua. Hey, so what's the lesson for this? The Rebbe brings out a lesson how any area of Torah is important, and even forgetting one area of Torah touches the whole. Here in this case, we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu learned from the fact that he has changed, meaning even though it's not in an area where it would impact his transmission to the Yidden, but since he is not in his level, that means that there's a time now of the lower Pnei Levona from Yeshua. The lesson is from them Inyan Visis by Moshe Vert Euch Ha'ero in der Aveda for Yadarin. This also becomes a lesson for every Yid. Now, how could we learn from Moshe Rabbeinu? But Barum Hafal Pi, the Rebbe quotes from the Tanya. Who is this and who could it be? Asher of Liboy, whose heart would even try Logeshes to guarantee him, have the sort of the audacity to come close, to grasp lahasig, afilu chelik echad, even one portion, in the elef, one portion of 1,000, mimadreges from the level of Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, which is Moshe Rabbeinu. How could we even learn a lesson from him? Is aber mitzad them, but because of the fact was called nefesh v'nefesh mebeis Yisrael. Every soul of the Yidden, as Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, yesh bo mebchinas Moshe Rabbeinu al vasholim, has from the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, We all have a part in our soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. So every Yid can reach Efes Kotzeu V'Shemes B'neihu. Maybe a drop of its edge and somewhat of it. So somewhat at some level we could learn a lesson that we can reach from Moshe Rabbeinu. So what's the lesson here? We can say this is the contents of the saying of our sages of blessed memory. It says, one who forgets even one item from his learning, the Torah considers it upon him as if you're guilty with your soul. That's how bad your soul, you're guilty with your life for forgetting one thing of Torah. Why should there be such a very serious punishment just for forgetting one item of his learning? Possibly that he remembers everything of Torah with exception of this one item. Is einer from the biurim in them. So one of the explanations is this. Why is that so serious, forgetting one thing? Bei Yid darfen divrei Torah nechlich werden in sein Etzem mitzias. A Yid, the words of Torah need to be engraved in the essence of his existence. Bis in an Eufen, to such an extent, as jeder Wort von Torah rührt on sein Etzem mitzias, that every word of Torah touches the essence of his existence, unteriber. And therefore, the etzem passirung, just for something to happen like this, forgetting one item. So you say it's only one, but it's one. No matter what the quantity is. This should cause a break in your essence of your existence. As if you were guilty with your soul, because this is, any part of it touches your soul. So this is as far as remembering Torah. The same thing is in time. That every moment, every instant of his life, Torah needs to be connected with Torah. And therefore, when a Yid is chaz v'sholom mevatel Torah, when a Yid wastes time of Torah, I feel even one instant when that he's able to learn Torah is same idea, like forgetting an item of Torah is wasting time for learning Torah. Easy kodesh to kodesh. To be cut off. Why? Such a penalty seems just like by forgetting es rirt on it touches your existence. Valdo is nit poil the kamus as man, because here the time, the quantity of time is not that impacts. Was hat verfehlt zu lernen, that he missed learning, so it's a small part. It's not about the quantity here, nor the etzem zach, but this is the thing itself. As es is durch a rega, when is nit given verbunden mit Torah, that there was a moment that he was not tied to Torah. So therefore, this tells us that even if it's not seem impactful, it's just a short time, it's just one halacha. No, that touches your essence. Similar with regards to all matters of Yiddishkeit. By a Yid, darf der Inyan von Avodas Hashem, by a Yid, the service of Hashem, sein Nechkak, sein Metzias, that needs to be engraved in your existence. Azoi, to such an extent as the cleansed der Inyan von Avodas Hashem. Even the smallest part of service of Hashem, afila digdul kal shel divrei sofrim, even if it's a small point of the words of the rabbis, an inference, learning out, or the afila minhag Yisrael, even if it's a Jewish minhag. It's not the quantity, it's not the importance, it's not how much it is, darf im seine geben, it still needs to touch in your soul. Bis as oiben verfällt chas v'sholem afilu dovrecha. To the extent, even if he misses out, even God forbid, one item, unadover achi kal, even something very light, poiltes ashvira b'chom. This impacts a breaking in his whole essence. Und das kufa, fact that you feel that way and that you're broken and that mischayev benavshei or koris to koris, das gufa bringt him to meisiv sein in Avodas Hashem, to add in the service of Hashem, und in an öfen, in such a way as it feels v'yeder inyan toivas tut, to the extent that every good thing that he's doing, his meisiv is an etzem chayis, adds to the essence of your life, of vitality. The vekis in the Chaya Chaim. So in the positive side, you adding everything adds to life, not just some small or aspect, but it's the essence of your life. The vekis in the Chaya Chaim, to cleave and connect to the one who gives vitalize his life. Makoira Chaim. By being connected to Hashem, now you're alive. Every mitzvah, every service of Hashem adds to our cleaving to Hashem that provides for us life. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Vayelech Tovshin Chof Vav.